How you doing, Met fans? Welcome to another edition of the Terry Collins Show, presented by Tunnel to Towers, supporting America's greatest heroes. Donate just $11 per month by going to T2T.org. That's T, the number 2, T.org. I'm John Arezzi, and joining me, as always, is the former skipper of the New York Mets, analyst for SNY's Baseball Night in New York, and a true baseball lifer, Terry Collins. How you doing, Terry?
Good, John. I'm doing great. How are you guys today?
Uh, pretty good, pretty good. I know down in Florida right now, you got a little bit of a weather situation going on with Hurricane Debbie. You and everybody else there in Port St. Lucie, okay?
Yeah, we're doing great. Fortunately, the storm went up the west side of the state and pretty much got past us when it was in the Gulf, and we got some rain. Those outer bands come through. We got a lot of rain and a lot of wind, but no damage, so we're lucky.
Well, that's good. That's good. I know that storm is moving pretty quickly, so glad that everything is good down there with you. Well, Terry, the trade deadline's over. The Mets are in the middle of a four-city road trip right now as they fight to remain in the wild card hunt, like so many other teams right now. We'll dive deep into all of that today on the show, and we will have some expert analysis from Andy Martino, who will join us shortly. Terry, always a pleasure to get Andy back on the show.
Yeah, he's certainly one of the great reporters in New York. When he was a beat reporter with the Mets, he was one guy that you could really trust to be as honest with you as he possibly could. I mean, he was upfront. He asked good questions. He didn't badger you. And if you said, "Hey, look, I'll talk to you about something, but I can't get out," it doesn't get out. And those guys were very, very. They're special because that's a tough job. Their job is to gather information and let that information go to the public. And there's certain things sometimes when you trust a reporter, you're not afraid to share them with some information, which kind of ingrains you that but they have to be trustworthy. So, Andy's one of those guys.
How long have you known Andy? How
Well,
many
I knew
years?
him when I first got the job in New York in 2011 when I first
Wow,
came in. Yeah, he was
he was
just
a
a
young
young guy
kid.
at the time.
Yeah. So that relationship formed, and we're so happy that we're bringing him back on today. It's a good time to bring him on with the trade deadline and the pennant races, of course. August is here, so it'll great to get his analysis. But let's get right into the leadoff, Terry, and talk about this current road trip the Mets are in the middle of. 10 games, 10 days, 4 different cities, 3 time zones. A trip like this is always a big challenge for the Mets, but it's even though they only have 2 games off this month, you've been through this too. You've had those road trips from hell yourself.
I sure have. There was, at one time we went on a road trip where we tremendous. We had to go from Minnesota to Colorado. We had snow in Minnesota, freezing cold. Flew to Colorado, got snowed out the first night. The second night, we had to play a doubleheader in below almost zero. I mean, below freezing temperatures. And then we had to have a makeup game in Colorado because it was supposed to be a 4-game series, and had to fly back during the season to Colorado on a Thursday night when we opened up on Friday, opened up a series against the Nationals, big series back then because they were, really good and we were really good. And so it was the Matt Harvey, Steven Strasburg game. And so we flew Matt back to New York, and we flew all night long to get back to New York on one of the most unbelievable nights where they were chanting Harvey's better, Harvey's better. And, and he pitched a great game against the Nationals. But I'll tell you, those position players, they were exhausted.
Yeah. JD Martinez was in the post-game presser yesterday, had mentioned that the game that really is he thinks they should have moved to the end of the season is the game they're playing in St. Louis, the one game to make up for that rain out. What are your feelings on something like that? Since the Mets only have 2 days off for the entire month, they're going to go back to Citi Field, play 9 games there, Oakland, Miami, Baltimore, then hit the road again on the West Coast for another 10 games. Taking into account everything, the game that they're playing in St. Louis, what's your feeling on? Should have they taken that game and played it if necessary at the end of the season?
Well,
Just taking into consideration what's going on with all these guys and the travel.
John, I totally understand where JD's coming from, but you think about this. Think about, okay, the season ends, and now this game means something. So you've got to go play that game. And let's just say that this is for a wild card spot. So you've got to win this game. And now the next day you have to play someone else who's you're tied with for a wild card. And so all of a sudden at the end of the year, and it throws the TV stuff into a whack. You've got to use some of your big pitchers to win a certain game. And at the end of the year, because of the way they set up the post game series now, I think there's like one day off before the wild card teams have to play, maybe two.
Yeah,
So now all of a
yeah,
sudden you add another game in the middle of that, and it's either way, it's a tough assignment. Doing it now, hey, look, you still got a long way. There's a lot of games left to play. Play it now. This is why they give you 23 guys. Use your guys. Get some of your main guys a rest. So when the season, if you keep playing, especially when you're playing good, you don't mind playing because you're playing good. So go out and go up there, beat them. Go to Colorado, give some of your guys a day off. Try to mix and match those days off. But it is
yeah.
part of the game, and it's a tough part of the game. But these guys are young and they're strong and they can get through it.
Yeah, and this game is pivotal too because if the Mets are able to win against St. Louis, then they win the season series. In case there is a tie between the Mets and the Cardinals going into that postseason, so it is a critical game for them as well. The whole week seems to be very critical, but unfortunately, the Mets bats have seemed to really cool off over the last week. During this past Angels series to begin the trip, they went 2 for 10 with runners in scoring position in Sunday's 3-2 loss. And they were 6 for 35 over the weekend, stranding 27 runners on base. Terry, how does a team how do you get back on track so this doesn't become kind of a long term team wide slump?
Well, if I watch a lot of the games, and I agree with what Keith Hernandez talks about once in a while, and that is, look, you're coming up in key situations where a single to center field counts, or a single to the opposite field, drives in a run or keeps an adds an extra run here and there. Those are big hits. And so again, you watch sometimes and you're seeing guys, still again, the home run, the power is one thing that the game is about today. But once in a while, a 2-out single with runner in scoring position can be hugely important. And I think what Keith talks about is, hey, look, use the big part of the park. And I think he's absolutely right. When you get in a slump, one of the things they used to tell hitters is, look, let the ball get a little deeper on you and hit it the other way. You can see it
Yeah.
just a few split second, a little bit longer. You ever talk to a guy who's in a slump and they're saying, I'm just not seeing the ball good. Well, you know what? You want to let it see it a little bit longer than you normally do. So don't be afraid to get some base hits the other way.
Yeah. Trade deadline is come and gone now, Terry. Mets picked up a couple of pieces. What was your assessment on what they did, holding back those top prospects, not going after the big marquee names, adding pieces here and there? So give us an evaluation on how you think they did during this trade deadline.
Well, I'll give you two sides of it. First of all, as a fan side, hey, look, they showed you they're trying. They think they got a chance to get, and they got some pieces that'll help the team continue to be successful. As the manager, I can't worry about what those guys in Double A are doing right now because I want to win. I got a chance with my team that I have right now. I got a chance to make a big impact in the postseason. So I'll go get that big piece if it's up to me trading those prospects. I don't never know what those guys are going to become. But they did help. They did get themselves some help. I applaud that. It keeps you excited, and I think the Mets fans are going to be in for a very, very excited final 50 games.
Yeah, I do too. It looks like it is going to be that way. And we didn't think so back in May, but we certainly do today. The team is looking good. And, it's just, it's exciting. And with all these teams bunched up together for this wild card, it makes it extra exciting because it's like you have 7 teams still in the hunt. So it's almost like every game is meaningful. And that's very exciting to see as a
I, I,
fan. And I'm sure you sitting in your seat as an ex manager is exciting for you as well.
Yep, you're right. And I love the fact that made more space for certain playoff teams because it keeps the entire baseball fan, no matter where you're at, excited. And we need that, John. We need that today to keep the excitement in our fan bases.
Yeah, that was just taking away from what you and Mendoza spoke about last week, and it's like, just stay positive, and that's what it's all about. And it is going to be an exciting ride the rest of the season. Terry, I'm in New York right now. We're working with our sponsor, Tunnel to Towers, for a couple of days here. Had a great meeting with Mariano Rivera this weekend. He's going to do a PSA for the foundation. Tomorrow we get to shoot with former Yankee Paul O'Neill, another great former baseball player and now an announcer. Tunnel to Towers continues to do amazing things for those 9/11 families, the first responders, the military, and the veterans. And Terry, there's some exciting things that they do. They're always doing something special, and they got several events that they're lining up right now for everybody for the military.
Well, I got lucky, John. I went and watched them open up a veteran center in Sarasota, Florida, and I'm going to tell you, it was one of the most humble experiences of your life to watch these guys, watch some of these first responders or wounded soldiers be a part of this, and what it means to them for what they're doing. They're building a new veterans village in Sarasota for 100. They're building a dormitory for 100 soldiers who can't fend for themselves right now. They're putting up 50 smart homes for wounded warriors and first responders that were hurt on the job. And I mean, you see the expression on their faces. They are so excited and so thankful that there's somebody out there who didn't forget about them. And it means so much to them and their families, the wives, in tears, their kids in tears, thinking that they have a home now, that they can, someplace they can call home. It's just a wonderful, wonderful foundation, and I'm honored to have them be a part of our broadcast.
Yeah, we always are, and their smart home dedication takes place Wednesday, August the 14th in Utah, and that's for Air Force Technical Sergeant Jesse Clark. Jesse was left paralyzed by a brain tumor linked to chemical exposure during the Gulf War. They broke ground in Memphis, Tennessee, a new veterans village that'll house more than 100 vets. And of course, Terry, as you know, their goal is to deliver 200 mortgage-free homes to those responders and Gold Star families with young children. And 40 specially adapted smart homes as well. So I'm amazed at all at what they do. Just in awe of the foundation, and we're so happy to be associated, as you said. And we will be back with This Week in Mets History following a message from the Mets, Pete Alonso.
Tunnel to Towers helps so many people. As a player of the Mets, I feel like for me, I have a responsibility to give back, especially to a cause that's authentically New York. And I just want to show appreciation for those brave men and women who really do a massive service, not just in New York, but everywhere. Hey, I'm Pete Alonso. Let's go Mets, and let's help the Tunnel to Towers Foundation.
Go to t2t.org for more information about how your donation can make a difference.
All right, we're back. Terry, This Week in Mets History, August the 4th, 1982. Very unusual situation took place. Joel Youngblood records a hit for the Mets in an afternoon game. He gets traded to the Expos during the game. He promptly flies to Philadelphia to meet his new team, who were facing the Phillies, and gets put in the game there and gets a hit, becoming the first player in Major League Baseball history to get a hit for two different teams on the same day. And you were talking about something that may be a little similar in regard to a Toronto Blue Jay player that was traded to the Red Sox.
Yeah, catcher Danny Jansen, who got traded at the trading deadline to Boston. He's going to be a part of a suspended game that the Blue Jays had with the Red Sox. The weather came in, they had to suspend the game, and Danny Jansen was at the plate in this game for the Blue Jays when they had to suspend the game. Since that has happened, the Boston Red Sox have designated their catcher for assignment, so he's not there. And Danny Jansen, who is up, they will have to have a pinch hitter for him, and he will then be the catcher for the Boston Red Sox for the remainder of that game. He may get a hit in this game. We don't know what's going to happen, but he may get a hit. And he will be the only player in history to play for both teams in the same game. It's going to be a real unique situation. And of course, he's one of the great players and great guys in the game. So it's pretty cool that it's going to happen to him.
Yeah, that's kind of cool. That's never happened before, and we'll wait to see. And Danny is somebody that was beloved in Toronto. Getting back to Mets history, Terry, you may be familiar with this one. August the 2nd, 2015, during a 5-run third inning, Curtis Granderson, Daniel Murphy, and Lucas Duda all hit home runs against National starter Jordan Zimmerman. That was enough for the Mets to win 5-2 and complete a 3-game sweep of Washington. And that sweep propelled the Mets into a first-place tie with the Nationals in the NL East. A lot of fans feel that this series was the turning point of the 2015 season. Mets never looked back after that. You were there. How significant was this sweep for the 2015 Mets?
Well, I can honestly tell you, John, that was the turning point. Those 3 games were the turning point in the season. I do believe, isn't that the same weekend that Wilmer hit the homer? I mean, I
Yes, it
think it's the
was.
same.
Yeah.
So that started it out. Wilmer hit a homer to win a game in extra innings. And then Sunday night, in front of a huge crowd, in front of a national TV audience, we hit those homers off Jordan Zimmerman, who had been a really tough pitcher for us, and that got us going. And we went on a roll from that point on, went on the road, and then went into Washington and stayed red hot against them and beat them up in the series in Washington to really put us over the top. Without a question, that was the turning point of the 2015 season.
And you also added a little tiny piece, Yoenis Cespedes.
Yeah, he was okay. He helped us a little bit. He was, yeah, I didn't, I forgot. Yeah, having Cess in that lineup kind of changed things around. But, you go back and, like Lucas Duda, he hit a huge home run that night. And then we get in the playoffs and he hits a grand slam against the Cubs that ices the series against the Cubs. So, it's nice to see those guys who were with the club, the added pieces of Cespedes and all the other guys really got it going. But it was nice to see what it meant to the guys who were on that team that really got them going, got them swinging the bats, and became a big piece of the team.
Exactly. Well, you can check out Mets history anytime on social media by going to @NYM History on both X and Instagram. And as we do each and every week, it's time for Talking with TC. On today's Talking with TC, we bring on an analyst with Terry on SNY's Baseball Night in New York. He covers both the Mets and the Yankees. He's covered the New York baseball scene for over 10 years. And his new book, The Yankee Way, The Untold Story of the Brian Cashman Era, is available everywhere. It's a pleasure, as always, to bring on our friend Andy Martino to this week's Talking with TC. Andy, welcome back.
Pleasure as always to be here, John. How you guys doing?
Very good.
We're doing great, Andy. Thanks again for coming on. We thought it was John and I were talking last week, and we said, with the trading deadline coming up and being over, it'd be a good thing to have Andy on, who's got a great perspective on, some of the deals made, some of them that weren't made. And so I thought, it might be fun to talk about, what it's like during the trading deadline. I know what it's like for the manager, but what's it like for, a reporter who's trying to cover, especially a guy like yourself who's trying to cover 2 teams and trying to stay on top of things. You must have been busier than anybody during that time.
What's it like, Terry? It's a living hell. No, I'll tell you. In all seriousness, it's fun to be able to tell the fans of the teams or try to, what's going on. I know there's a lot of interest in the trade deadline. I will say that what I love about the job personally is covering baseball games, reporting on baseball games. I'm sure when you started in the game, the idea of reporting wasn't limited to reporting on transactions, right? It's like, I saw a game, I'm going to report on what happened in that 2.5, 3 hours. And that's what I love. But the trade deadline stuff I get is it's something that people really care about. In the clubhouse, too, obviously. It's not just the fans that care about it. Mets players from Nimmo to Lindor, and I think Alonso said something, too. They were vocal about wanting David Stearns to add. So it's a big time of year. It's a busy time of year. But now it's over, and the team is the team. And that's an interesting thing, too. Now they got to ride with it.
So let's discuss some of the moves that were made by New York, by the Mets. Your thoughts on what they did, what they didn't do, is certainly as they head into the last 2 months.
I think Stearns threaded a needle. We got to see how the results go. A move like Jesse Winker or Paul Blackburn can look great on paper, and then you see how they perform. So far, like those guys have been pretty good. Blackburn in one start had a nice start. There was 2 ways to probably go with this, Terry, that were more dramatic. You could have gone big and traded your top prospects and $30 million for Blake Snell. That was an option. but a very, very, very pricey one. Or frankly, they could have done what the Tampa Bay Rays did, a couple games over 500, but the price of pitching is so high you could cash it and sell and improve your farm system. I think that's easier to do in Tampa than in New York with the intensity of the fan base and the coverage. So Stearns obviously did neither of those, and he decided to modestly add to the team. And again, on paper, it looks like he made the bullpen a little bit better, he made the back end of the rotation a little bit better, he made the bench a little bit better. Great. You had a good team, you kept it together, you didn't break it up, and you added to it a little bit. Makes sense to me. And then we look back on October 1st or thereabouts and see how these guys actually did.
Yeah, I really thought bringing a couple guys in, because I do like their lineup. But, one of the things they really had to do for me was, they really needed find a big gun in that bullpen. And, Andy, as you know, being a former minor league director, I love players. I love minor league play. I love player development to death. But I know one thing about player development. Part of your job is to produce players to play in the big leagues, whether it's with the team you're with or with somebody else's team that you can use as a big piece to go get a guy. And during my time as a farm director, I got to tell you, I see all those numbers today. I see, this team's, this is guys, their number 35 prospect. I'm going to tell you, Andy, there's not a team in baseball that's got 35 major league prospects. Not a one. I don't care I don't care how you place it. There isn't. If you got 15 to 20 guys that you say are going to be big league players, that's a lot. That's a tremendous system. And one of the things that teams like Tampa Bay have done, they've drafted very well and they've signed their guys. And then when the time comes, when they think they're ready, they put them in the big leagues. St. Louis has done it for years. And so now, unfortunately, they got to use their time properly so that they get control of these guys for a number of years at the big league level. And that was one of the things as I've tried to research some of the Mets in the minor leagues again. I know last year they went out and made some deals that they think strengthen their minor leagues. Well, you better be sure when you're in a hunt like the Mets are right now. By the way, they're 7 games out for first place. We're not talking about a wild card. We're talking 7 playing games out. And as we've known in the past, 7 games can be eaten up in 10 days. So, you better make sure you've made the right moves to bring in the right pieces, because you never know what those last 50 games are going to be like.
You make a great point about those prospect lists, Terry, who obviously real player development people are in the weeds on PD kind of roll their eyes at those sometimes. But when you mentioned that made me wonder, when you were in your heyday of player development, I guess you had a couple of heydays in the 80s before you got into Major League staffs, and then again with the Dodgers in the early 2000s, the Mets in 2010. Were those lists, I know Baseball America existed, were those lists a topic of discussion in PD back then, or is that more modern with the internet and such?
No, they're, because some of those guys, especially with Baseball America, I mean, a lot of those guys researched. They would call maybe the Cleveland Indians and say, hey, you guys played the Dodgers a lot. What do you think about some of this guy and that guy? So kind of get an idea of what other clubs felt about their positions. But the one thing we did in Los Angeles, and I can only tell you when I was there, and I told our guys, listen, we all love our players, but we can't overrate our players because we like them so much. So and that's why when I'd go to games, I would look at the other team we're playing and I'd say, would I rather have their guy, their shortstop, or my shortstop? If my shortstop's a prospect and their shortstop's a prospect, of these two guys, which one's better? And so, I wanted to really make sure our guys had a good feel, because again, you're fighting the scouting department too at the same time, because they love those guys. They signed those guys, they've scouted them, they signed them, they gave them a lot of money. And they want their guys to get to the big leagues because they get rewarded for it. And when all of a sudden you have heads butting in the minor league system about this guy being a prospect or this guy being in the scout think, well, he should be in AAA next year, and you're saying, look, he's not even close to being ready for AAA. That can be an issue within the organization. So those were things as when it came to the deadline, I always thought the general manager, again, if you have the right system, I'm not saying it any different, but I always thought when I was with Los Angeles, the Dodgers never made one trade in my time in the minor leagues without a meeting with myself, the pitching coordinator, the hitting coordinator, and some of the minor league managers when you were talking about possibly making a deal for somebody else, in somebody else's organization, who they saw, and not just go by what scouts are saying. I mean, there was a scout I knew years ago when I was managing in the minor leagues, I talked to him before a game one day. I said, what do you think of my team? And he said, I don't like anybody on your team. I said, you don't like anybody? You don't like Sid Fernandez? I mean, see, he's 19 years old. The guy had 170 strikes. You don't like him? You go, I think he's going to have a weight problem. Well, but that's sometimes what you got to deal with. But when you talk to the pitching guys in our organization, all they talked about is this guy's going to be a guy. So, I mean, that's why I talk about the deadlines. And Buck Showalter and I talk about it a lot, about classifying prospects and who really are the guys who are going to be mainstays if they get to the big leagues.
Yeah, those are great questions. That's where the self-scouting seems to work too. And in my time covering the game, I don't know if they did this stretching back to the 80s. I'm sure some organizations probably did. But you talk about how the amateur scouts get attached to these players. One thing, like the Yankees do this pretty effectively, you have your own best pro scouts on your farm system quite a bit, right? So included in those meetings can be someone who's a little detached. Like Tim Nearing's a guy that does this a lot for the Yankees. He didn't draft these guys. He didn't sign them. He doesn't coach them. He just watches. So it's like, Tim, what do you think? Should we trade this guy? Yes or no? And that seems like a valuable piece of it too. I think in the past, the Mets haven't used their pro scouts in that way on their own system as well as they could. I'd be interested to see if Stearns beats that up. Over time.
Andy, that's a tremendous point because, 1 year I advanced scouted for the Chicago Cubs. Don Baylor was a great friend of mine. And when he got the job in Chicago, he called me and I had just left the Angels and he said, would you be my advanced scout? And I said, no, I want no part of that. He said, listen, I really need your input on this stuff. And so I did it. I worked very, very hard. And, I was out, I don't know how many days in a row, like 50 straight days watching, teams are going to play. And all of a sudden in the middle of the season, I gave a report on somebody they were going to play. And it was a pitcher and he mowed down the Cubs. And Don called me and he said, hey, look, when you see somebody who's got that good a changeup, we don't hit changeups. Well, I didn't know that because I never saw the Cubs. And so it goes back to the same thing, using your pro scouts about, hey, you better analyze your own team. And that's why I'm saying you better look at your team and say, okay, here's our group of guys. And this guy over here might be available. And maybe it's going to cost you a top 15 guy, top 15 prospect. But if he's a better player and he's got to give you a better chance to win in the biggest, and again, you're talking to a manager now who wants all the best players. If this guy is going to give me a chance to win, make the deal because you don't know what those other guys are going to do. And you and I can sit here today and talk about trading deadline guys, Jeff Bagwell, John Smoltz, a lot of guys who at the trading deadline were in minor and AA, and nobody knew it. Nobody knew they were going to be Hall of Famers. So you make the trade to get you better now. And I went through it in Houston one time when we were in first place and Jeff Bagwell went down and we needed a first baseman and they wouldn't trade 2 minor league prospects to get 2 legitimate good big league players. And we didn't win. And you never know how, it's hard to win in the big leagues. So when it comes to these trading deadlines, as the manager, I always said, hey, look, trade a prospect. If we win, it'll make up for, what happens in 10 years from now. We don't know. So
yeah, you got to take that risk sometimes. There's a lot of risk aversion in the business, but some aren't. Omar Minaya is really great at this. Like, don't worry about being embarrassed. Just trade. If you brought up Smoltz, you traded for Doyle Alexander, I believe. Obviously, it goes down in history as a bad trade. I don't remember who the GM was. It might have been Bobby Cox. It might have been just before his time in Atlanta. But anyway, in Atlanta and Detroit. But anyway, hey, look, at the time we'd go, good job, you're trying to win. You got Doyle Alexander. And so those things, sometimes you just have to pull the trigger and not be afraid to be embarrassed, probably.
I told Ned Colletti was there when I was there. Paul DePodesta was GM of the Dodgers at the time. And I told those guys at the trading deadline, look, you got to move one of our guys. You know what our job is? To get another one. Our job in the scouting department's job is to go find another guy and produce him and make sure he becomes a big league player. There was years ago, at one time when I was playing in AAA, the Dodgers had the same infield for 12 years. So, those guys coming up through the minor leagues, you use those pieces to make the Dodgers better, the big club better. And look, it's nice to say, oh, geez, I read all the time where Baltimore's got this great minor league system. Well, guess what? They better help the Baltimore Orioles win. And if that means taking one of those guys and going to get a number 1 starter maybe, or, get Corbin Burns or another guy like that to say, hey, look, this is going to put us in a chance to win the world championship. You got to make those deals for me.
Well, those are deals the Mets could have made. They could have gone down that lane, right? To get back to your original question, we're talking about Terry, about their deadline. So Tanner Scott, obviously lefty reliever from Miami. I'm sure you remember him from your time there. Guy with some control problems, but really good stuff. Goes to San Diego for two really top prospects. And I talked to someone with the Mets that was like, you're going to give up 12 years of potentially good players for 15 innings of Tanner Scott. 3 or 4 of those innings, he might walk the ballpark. That's one way to look at it. Another way to look at it is what you just said. Just go win the World Series. An interesting needle to thread. I'm not saying I have the answer, but I guess those are the two sides of it.
Yeah, I mean, that'll be determined here in the next 3 or 4 years as we watch those two guys that got traded to Miami, where they end up. I look at, I was with, when I saw the Marlins last year when they made the trades to get David Robertson from the Mets. I saw those two kids in the minor leagues.
Complex,
and
yeah.
They're okay. They're okay.
Yeah.
Are they going to be stars? Not in my estimation, but hey, look, you do what you got to do, and hopefully they develop and get better. But I always thought as part of the minor league system is, hey, look, that's our job is to produce big league players. And if you got to trade them as the GM, we'll just produce some more. And that's that's the way I always looked at it.
Yep. John, you notice what just happened? About 11 minutes or so, we just fell back into Terry and I have a hard time breaking out of I'm interviewing him. We didn't even mean to do that.
Good. I mean, I think it's cool, actually.
We did it for too many years, Terry. I took it over by mistake. What can I tell you? He's got good stories.
Yeah, well, so Andy, right now, in your mind, from what you're looking at, do you think that the Mets are going to be able to keep this going at this pace? Because their bullpen has been, I mean, I can't tell you who's in the bullpen today.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, that's pretty funny. I sent Carlos a text. I said, man, it's a good thing you got names on those uniforms so you know who's coming in.
I'm sure he appreciated that because he knows how that bullpen's been a struggle through the year, right? That's been the one thing that's really held them back. And poor Mendy's been trying to manage it day to day, doing a fantastic job squeezing the most he can out of it. Obviously, you look at his season when Edwin Diaz is, who is Edwin Diaz this year, and Carlos is dealing with that, let alone other issues down the chain in the bullpen. How do I think it's going to go? I think this is a team with a special offense. I think they have. They're fortunate to have a flawed field, right? Like you don't look at any of the other contenders in that wild card and go, "Oh, that team's going to run away with it." Even the Phillies have had a bit of a cold stretch, but I'm kind of delaying the fact that what I'm saying is, without trying to be a Debbie Downer, I can see some real things to be concerned about in the pitching staff. I think they're doing the best they can, but Severino's velocity was down in his first start after the break. He's thrown the most his first start after the trade deadline. He's thrown the most innings that he's ever thrown since 2018. That's something you look at. Go, okay. The bullpen is a work in progress. Maybe these guys get hot. Great for the Mets if they do. I don't know that we can guarantee it, right? And then when the offense gets cold, as it has been a little bit lately, so they're 9-7 since the All-Star break, and they look a little more mortal. That's the long season, right? When a baseball team is hot, you can't imagine them losing. Even if your whole life experience tells you it's going to come down at some point. And the Mets were there for a long time. But now they've leveled off a little. They're as I said, they've been 9-7 in their last 16. Just lost a series of the Angels in the morning that we're talking with some bullpen issues. Lonzo continuing to have a tough season. So they were really hot for a while. We'll see what happens next. I guess that's how.
Well, yeah, and everybody, as we Andy, you and I have talked about it, John and I have talked about it, and every fan should know there's hot. Every team is going to be hot at one time and cold at one time. You're looking at the Braves with their injuries now; they've cooled off. The Phillies have cooled off. That's why you look on. A month ago they were 17. The Mets were 17 games out of first place. Now they're 7. So I mean, somebody may get hot again. You don't know, but that's why it's a long season. That's why you can't get too down early. You got to keep and say, hey, look, let's talk about it in July, and that's why that trading deadline becomes such a big factor. When all of a sudden you got to decide. I mean, you're looking at some of the teams, Andy, that were 2 games out and said, well, we just don't think we got the horses to finish this off. So we're going to move some of these guys and get some help for the future when we really got a legitimate chance.
I think if the Mets played in Tampa, like we were talking about before, maybe they it's easier to make a decision like that. Because when you really look at the rotation, for example, they've gotten some good performances out of guys, but that's not if you once you get into a playoff series, you go, is that the rotation this year? The 2024 rotation is going to get us to the World Series. Hell, baseball's so confusing that maybe it is, right? Sometimes illogical things happen, but they could have taken a cold hard look at it and said that. But good for David Stearns for saying, screw it, we're going to try to win. We're going to try to go for it, even if we have our flaws and our warts. And so we'll see how it goes. I'll tell you, before getting too rational / negative about it, Terry, I'll say I'm really glad they did this, because 2 months of meaningless baseball after a sell-off, as you well know, are pretty rough. And they did it last year. They put your teams through that as the manager a number of times before you guys had your window. And I'm just glad that we get to see pennant race games that matter. I know this will air after the St. Louis game, but as we're talking, they're getting ready to play in St. Louis. If they could clinch, the tiebreakers now in the wild card is the head-to-head record. The Mets could clinch the tiebreaker over the Cardinals today. So there's really something at stake, which is great. That's what you want when you're watching a baseball team. And however it goes is going to depend on how they play. And I'm not foolish enough to sit here and try to predict it. I can tell you what to be concerned about it, and you can see it. You've got eyes, but thank goodness they're actually trying. That's more fun than the alternative, right?
Absolutely, and I totally agree with you. I thought what David did. Hey, look, you know what? We like where we're at right now, so we're gonna give this a shot as best we can. I think it's great. I love the expanded format. I just think it keeps baseball exciting in so many towns. I mean, you're looking at now all the teams that are 2 or 3 games out of a wild card. They're still excited. Their team, their fan bases are still excited. And you're right. I'm telling you, I was on those teams when, you got 2 months left in the season and you got no chance. And you've got some of the guys that have just going through the motions and it's ugly. It can be ugly. It can be ugly in that clubhouse. So I think it's great that the Mets did what they did. And I think it's exciting, certainly for the city of New York, to have the Yankees get hot again. I think it's great. I would love nothing more than to all of a sudden look up in the last 2 weeks of the season to have both these teams fighting for big time potential. Yeah. I just think the excitement in the city would be crazy.
100%. And so Stearns has given the Mets a fighting chance. Slight deviation from his plan. I mean, they were never going to do a rebuild, but this was a year to, what do you want to call it, reload a little bit or plan for the future. And the fact that they ended up in this position, they acted on it. They did something about it. And it will be fun. Ever since 2000, I've been waiting for another Subway World Series. Obviously, those are so much fun. I'm not saying this is the year, but it's cool that it's not impossible right now. That day, you're right. That day when the season is kind of when everyone knows it's over, or that week, or whenever it kind of sets in, that's pretty brutal. You know when that was in the old, on my side in the newspaper business, which I'm obviously not in anymore. We used to have, when I was on the beat and you were the manager, the game story would be, say, 600-700 words, and then you'd have the separate notes column, another 500-600-700 words. And the day you knew the season was over was when the office said, just give me 500 total, tack on a few notes at the end. That's when you knew, instead of the 2 separate stories taking up a page or 2, just give me 500. And it was a mixed feeling because you go, well, the games I'm covering this year aren't going to matter anymore, but I'll get to the bar earlier after the game. I only have to send 500 words in. So, but it wasn't as fun as like 2015, obviously, when it mattered till the end, right?
Yeah, that's right. John, I know you got some questions for Andy.
Oh yeah, I would love to see a Subway Series myself. 2000 was great, as a Met fan, I wasn't happy with the result. But seeing that excitement this year at the Subway Series that the Mets swept for the first time since Terry was manager in 2013, I mean, that was kind of exciting. So that will be wonderful to see. But I wanted to kind of pivot to those prospects that the Mets held on to, that they didn't, leverage the future for the present. There's some really quality guys there right now. Are there any on this list that could make an impact in September, especially when you look like a Brandon Sproat, who just struck out 11 in a row? We got promoted to AAA already. Who are the guys in the system that you think may have an impact in September?
That's who I was going to mention. Sproat would be the guy who sticks out because there's a potential. He's a starting pitcher, they think, long term, but there's a chance to help the bullpen potentially later in the season. Not a sure thing. So that's the guy, John, I would single out. I don't think they have a ton of guys at positions of immediate need where you say, like Conforto in 15, where it's like, I'll bring him up, plug him in. But Sproat is a guy who could do it. It hasn't been the greatest year with their top prospects with some injuries and some um, performance that was a little bit under what they thought or not being on the field as much as they thought. So, like a guy like Drew Gilbert, I saw him in spring training as a really exciting athletic player with speed and some power, but he was hurt for so much of the year that some of the timetables have been set back a little bit. But Sproat for sure could help big league team this year potentially.
Okay, and looking to 2025, it's almost a certainty now that Justin Verlander was not going to reach that benchmark, which gives him that option for a vesting year, and that's going to really save them at $17.5 million. They have a lot of dead money coming off the books after this season. That money can now be used in potential free agents. And there is always a lot of talk about Soto with the Yankees. Looks like he's having a great time.
Yep.
What's your take on the Soto situation? Is it going to be a New York team or bust? And Soto also says, well, maybe, L.A., Ohtani. What's your gut on Soto? Do you think the Mets would really, really cross that line and go after this guy?
Yes, they do. They didn't go after Judge because Judge was, in part, there were a lot of reasons what they were doing at that time, but also Judge is like a Yankee. He's their guy. Soto's not their guy. They've rented him for a year. We'll see how the seasons end. There were months where it was like, why would Juan Soto want to go from the Yankees to the Mets? Look at the way these two seasons are going. And then you look at the Subway Series and the way that went, you're like, Soto might want to walk over to their clubhouse right now. This team's got a way better feel to it. So we'll see how it feels at the end. That's that proverbial long season. But I don't see why the Mets wouldn't investigate that. I'm not telling you they're definitely going to be the high bidder. I'm not telling you that Stearns ultimately decides this is the right way to spend all that money. But no question in my mind that they're going to be in on that and look into it. And that's something to watch in New York baseball for sure. We thought Yamamoto was going to be the first Hal Steinbrenner, Steve Cohen bidding war, and it would have been, but the guy wanted to go to L.A., as it turned out. So Soto, to me, could be that situation. And a lot of that has to do with Alonso. The Mets, for all the money that Cohen has, John, don't want to be in this position year in, year out where they're over that top luxury tax threshold where they're paying 110 cents on every dollar, where things just don't make sense. For example, they might have signed Jordan Montgomery last year, but he would have cost them like $60, $70 million of that tax, and that just didn't make sense to them. So they'd like to be under that so they don't have to make those calculations. Or they might have signed Hector Neris, who got, I think, $9 million. Is that an $18, $20 million player? You see what I'm saying. They want to not have to think of every player costing double and then some. So where I'm going with this is they have to figure out if they're going to keep Alonso. That's going to impact Soto. That's going to impact a Corbin Burns, who's also out there. A Blake Snell, who also has an opt-out, who could be out there. They're not just going to collect all these guys. They're going to try to make some judicious choices between them. But they got a lot of money to play with, and they'll be heavy hitters on the free agent market one way or the other.
Yeah, and the Yankees could be looking for first baseman too. So, I mean, wouldn't that be,
Yeah,
like a
people have mentioned
fantasy
that.
baseball dream if they go after Alonso and the Mets go after Soto? Wouldn't that build that rivalry up
It
to a
would.
place it's never been?
It would be dramatic. I would. There's a couple reasons why I'm skeptical of that. One, they like a left-handed hitter at first base when they can, and two, they like a defender at first base. And Pete works really hard and has made himself way better than I'm sure anyone who saw him in the minor leagues thought he would be defensively. But they really like a guy that can pick it at first if they can find one. So that'd be one thing I would say about that.
Yeah. Well, I know you and Terry are going to be together in New York again. There's a big event coming up in New
Yeah.
York, Fanatics Fest. I think you guys will be there, the SNY Baseball Night in New York crew on Saturday, August 17th at the Javits Center in New York City. It looks like a massive event. do you have any information to share with us as far as what you guys will be doing there? And is it a
Yeah.
live broadcast? So fill us in, because I'm really curious, and I think Terry, you might be curious too as far as what's going on that day there in the Big Apple.
It's funny. They haven't given us a ton of information. It's like, hey, could you be at the Javits on the 17th? Yeah, okay. But I do know, and Terry, you probably had the same conversation, but I do know it won't be on TV. It's a live baseball night in New York. You got to be there to see it. And I also know that, Terry, I don't know if you've seen this. They have this Photoshop ad that they do with me and you and Sal and Todd's faces in it, and we're all wearing polos in it. Well, I'm wearing a jacket, but I'm towards the back. But anyway, you've got a suit on and a microphone, so you sort of look like Frank Sinatra, and we're your backup musicians or something in the image. So maybe Terry's gonna sing "My Way."
Probably.
You'll have to, Terry, can you sing? Nothing, no singing voice there at all.
Easter parade. I can sing the Easter parade.
There you go. So I think it'll be a baseball night in New York show. If you want to see if Terry's going to sing standards, you got to show up and find out.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I do plan on being there. I am looking forward to it.
Good.
It looks like a massive event, so we'll be there as well. But before I turn it back to Terry, I know obviously you follow the Yankees, you report on the Yankees, you're there. I gotta talk to you about Judge. I mean, I have never seen a season like this. This is like Barry Bonds like. This is an amazing thing to see every day. And now he's starting to get intentionally walked. And talk to us about what this guy means to baseball, and as he's ascending into kind of this all-time great ball player. So talk to us about Judge.
Yeah, I can't say enough about it. I think he's the greatest player I've ever seen on a regular basis. You can make an argument for Alex Rodriguez, of course. Knowing what we know about A-Rod, maybe you factor that in too. But regardless, we see what we see on the field. It's absolutely incredible what he does day in and day out. The fact that he's such a defender too. People want to debate Soto versus Judge, or Bryce Harper versus Judge, or whoever you want to talk about as the greatest player. Judge plays an elite right field. They actually miss him in right field. But the fact that he now, because of necessity, has moved over and played a perfectly fine center field, if not better than fine, that's incredible. A guy that big that hits that many home runs playing center field, jeez, it's like the holy grail in baseball, right? To play at one of those defensive positions. And I mean, he's not Harrison Bader out there, but the fact that he can even do it is incredible. As a defender, there's that. His leadership is really genuine. I would say, just in my own personal limited scope of experience covering teams intimately, he and David Wright are two leaders who you really go, man, that guy's the real deal. Really cares about people. Terry kind of reminds me of David a little as a leader, and that he doesn't separate the stars that he plays with to the last reliever or the last guy on the bench. He engages with all of them. I think David was good with that too, being a leader to everybody on the team and saying the right things at the right times. And he's really got a feel for that. It's really incredible to watch. And you hope, for baseball's sake, being someone who's not a fan of any team, it would be really good if that guy could walk away from his career with a championship, because it's the one thing that's sort of missing, obviously, at this point. For him to not have to be a Don Mattingly in Yankee history, be the guy that didn't get it. At some point, he deserves it, because he really, really cares, and we just see how good he is. It's incredible.
Yeah. Amazing season for that guy. Well, I appreciate it. And Terry, back to you.
Yeah, and according to when you guys brought up Judge, you brought up Barry Bonds. I mean, what Barry did after even being walked all those times is incredible. I mean, anytime you did pitch to him, he did damage. I mean, and that's if Aaron can do that, and especially Andy, you brought up playing center field. I will tell you, if I'm New York, if I'm the Yankees, I've got to be saying to myself, we got to be very careful with this guy in center field, because that is one grueling position to play. And if he blows one of those legs out, I mean, the impact of him being hurt on that lineup is going to be devastating. And so the fact that he's out there every day playing center field and doing what he's doing, is a testimony to what a great player he is, because those are two things that are amazing. And, they're going to have to work hard to find somebody that can protect him. I mean, and I know, obviously because I saw Giancarlo Stanton when he was, the best player in the game at one time. If he ever can get red hot and you put him behind Aaron Judge, boy, I tell you, that is going to be one devastating middle of the lineup.
Great point. That shows you what they missed with Stanton too, because he was pretty hot early. He was going to be the comeback player of the year. He hurts his hamstring, and all of a sudden, there's games where J.D. Davis is hitting behind Judge and some others, and there's just no reason to pitch to him. You're right. That must have been amazing to see with Bonds. I wasn't as keyed into the game. I was as a fan of the game, but you're managing against him. I didn't watch him the way I watch Judge now. Did you? I'm sure you faced the Giants in interleague. Did you walk him with bases empty? Walk him to any of those unconventional, intentional walks? Did you manage him like that?
Well, I also managed when I was in Houston, when he was in San Francisco.
Oh, right,
and
of course.
I will tell you, one time, matter of fact, one time he came in, and I've told you guys the story. I mean, I locker next to Barry in Pittsburgh for a long time, so I consider Barry a good friend, and we have hundreds of conversations. But they came into Houston one time, and Barry was taking batting practice, getting ready to take batting practice. We were hitting first, and he walked over to talk to me, and I said, "What are you going to hit for?" And he looked at me, he said, "What?" I said, "Why are you hitting? I'm not pitching to you. You're going to be here 3 days, pal. Matter of fact, you can come up without a bat, and I'm not pitching to you." Because that's how dangerous he was. And then when we played him in interleague, it was a little different situation. But yeah, I was taught many years ago. Walter Alston, Sparky Anderson, both guys said the same thing to me as I was coming up as a young manager. They said, "Listen, do yourself a favor and don't ever let the other team's star beat you if you can help it." Mm-hmm. And, Buck did it. Buck did it the one time when he was managing in Arizona where he walked Barry with the bases loaded. He just said, "I'm not going to let this guy hit a grand slam and lose the game. Someone else is going to have to do it." And that's the way you approach those guys. And that's why, I saw this, again, I saw the game yesterday with the Yankee game, and that's what's going to happen. And they better get used to it. And you better hope Wells gets really hot, because he's going to have to come up with a lot of guys on base, and they're going to, they're going to win games because that second part of that lineup drives in some runs.
Yeah. I agree. That's crucial for them, is that bottom half of that lineup. You could say that for any team, but because of the Judge factor, even maybe more so for them. I agree.
Yeah. So what big series you got coming up you're going to cover?
Well, let's see. We got the Yankees come in this week. As you know, I generally, other than big series I travel for, I stick with who's in town. So we've got the Yankees next week. The Mets, we're not going to see the Mets in person for a month. They've got the craziest road trip that we've ever seen. They're out west for weeks, it seems like. So we'll be following them from a distance and then watching the Yankees try to stay. They've stabilized themselves pretty well since the break, and continue to do that. Try to do that this week for sure.
I know there's a lot being said about what's going to happen with the Mets on this road trip. And the talk is about them having to go back for one game in St. Louis. And, I feel bad for them, but, that's part of the game. And I went through it, as you know, Andy. I had to do that one time. We had a makeup game in Colorado after we got snowed out. And you know what? It was grueling. But that's what the game is, guys. And it's, They've tried to give you more days off now so that the players can stay healthier, so the stars can be on the field more. But you're going to run into situations once in a while where those bench players are going to really have to make an impact. Again, today's the perfect example of it. You've got a big series right after this where you're going up against playing Colorado. Again, for me, a team that you got to go in and beat up a little bit, because then you got Seattle who can, with their pitching, can beat you. So, there's going to be a time when you got to decide which night am I going to go to my bench guys and give my big guys a day off during this road trip? And I'm looking at today saying this could be the perfect time, even though, like you said, it's head to head, but boy, you still got to look at the big picture down the road of how much trying to keep your regular players in good health and rested enough.
That's got to be one thing that Carlos is learning. We all know we can see that he arrived in his first managing job pretty polished, pretty good as a manager, but his intensity is such, and I bet you were the same way, it's hard to take your foot off the gas even a little bit, right? Because especially, if we win today, we've got the head-to-head over St. Louis versus resting guys. And knowing Carlos and his intensity, and he's intense in the dugout all through the game, and he's aggressive with pitching changes through the game, that's probably something he has to learn a little bit, is when to just take the throttle off a little bit versus, playing the long game. You're always trying to win, but playing the long game versus game 7 every day. I think that's maybe the top adjustment he's been trying to figure out how to make. I would imagine that wasn't easy for you too, as an intense competitor.
Without a question, but as he studied under Aaron, I mean, I did the same thing with Leland, and I was always amazed how Jim, the days he used his backup players, he got games out of them. I mean, he set it up. He looked at that schedule intently and said, this is the perfect matchup for Lloyd McClendon. This is the perfect matchup for Dave Clark. This is the perfect matchup for Gary Varsho. And those guys knew it and prepared for it and had big games for him. And that's where I think you're looking at a situation during this road trip where Carlos is going to have to go to those backup guys and say, hey, look, this is going to be your game. So get yourself ready physically and mentally, because you're going to make a big impact on this road trip if we can, give some of our guys a rest and you guys produce. So
that's a great point. Winning on the margins, like finding the right matchups for your bench guys and stuff. So maybe how you finish a game or two ahead of the other team in the race. It's a great call.
So John, we got some questions for some fans for Andy.
We do not today. No.
Andy's got no fans
today.
You got a lot of fans. You got a lot. Yeah. We must have just covered we must cover all the questions, Andy, when we get together. I'm going to tell you, when I'm in New York and Andy and I are together, we do solve a lot of problems. We leave at the end of a show, and then we have ourselves a cold one when the show's over, and the world's a better place when we leave and go back to the hotels. I'll tell you that.
Well, let's do it again after the live baseball night at Javits. How about that?
Are you actually going to wear a suit to that?
I gotta ask what the dress code will be, if we can get away with polos or what. I think I know what you're getting at, Terry. Terry always gets on me in spring training. He shows up in his full suit for our shows, and I'm like, spring training, I'm coming in a polo. And
I told you, John. I keep telling him all the time. This is the big leagues. This is the big leagues.
You're not wrong. But it's also Florida in February, and I get to wear polos. I hear you. I think I might have to pack a suit next time, John, just to keep him from giving me a hard time for the 3rd or 4th straight year. Yeah.
Well, as always, Andy, thanks so much for being on and being a good friend and having a great opinion on and a great concept of what's happening in the game, because it's fun to talk to you about it, and we'll do it again before the season's over.
It's my pleasure as always, Terry. I've said it before, but you gave us so much time as a reporter. When you were manager, you gave us so much time that I will give time to you and whatever you're doing for as long as you want to do it. That's the way that works. I'll never say no when you want something.
I appreciate it, pal. Take care.
Always a pleasure to bring on Andy Martino, and I love the chemistry both of you have with each other. It's amazing.
Well, we've known each other for a long time, and every time we get together, whether I'm in New York or Andy's down here in spring training, we get together, we have dinner, and we talk baseball. And he's got a great insight on it. I'm always amazed these reporters, the contacts they have throughout baseball to get information. And so, when you hear those guys talk, hey, there's something behind it, because they've talked to some people that, have given some of this information out. So it's always fun to talk to Andy. Again, great guy, good,
Yes.
Fun to be around, great sense of humor. So I'm glad he could come on.
Yeah, and he's a partner of yours and Baseball Night with New York as well. So, it's always great to see you guys connect with each other. And now, Terry, it's time for the Tunnel to Towers Amazing Hero of the Week segment. And this week, we highlight the T2T Sounds in the Round Songwriter Series with Nashville singer-songwriter Scotty Hastings and record executive songwriter Doug Johnson. It's a very cool series benefiting our veterans and first responders. Let's go to that right now.
Tunnel to Towers presents Sounds in the Round, an evening with songwriters to benefit our veterans and first responders.
My name is Scotty Hastings. I am a combat wounded Army infantryman, singer-songwriter, and recording artist.
Doug Johnson, Vice President of A&R for Black River Entertainment, producer, songwriter.
So I was shot in Afghanistan. I was shot 10 times, 5 times in the shoulder, 4 times in the hip, and once in the thigh. First thing you learn going through any type of therapy and stuff is if you bottle it up, it will eventually overflow. So for me, I'd always tried to find an outlet. Just learning to play the guitar and in the entirety of learning kind of helped me escape in that moment the PTSD, the depression, the anxiety that I deal with on a daily basis. I started learning how to write songs, and it became an escape for me when I needed it.
Fell in love with his talent, his voice, his heart, his mission, his total inspiration.
Number one, if you're a vet and you're in this room, thank you so much. All right? Thank you, all of you.
To have someone like Towers that cares enough to take veterans off the street and get them help and rebuild their lives, that's incredible.
I like this. It's very, very nice, and it feels a lot like home.
Towers is not just getting veterans off the street, but they're also getting them help to stay off the street.
Wow. It gives us hope as veterans.
From the very beginning, my mission has been to use my story and to use my music to help people. Tunnel to Towers is incredible. I mean, you're giving hope to people who are truly hopeless. And I think what they're doing is just so easy to want to be a part of.
A donation of just $11 will go a long way to support our first responders, military families, and our veterans. Go to T2T.org for more information about how your donation can make a big difference.
All right, we'll have another T2T Amazing Hero on next week's show as well. And Terry, before we close out this week, we want to congratulate Nikita Stefanos of New Jersey, who won the Terry Collins autographed Old Timers Day baseball in conjunction with our friends at Metcast. 37,000 impressions on that giveaway. So congratulations once again to Nikita. And that ball will be shipped out to you sometime this week, personally signed by Terry Collins. Congratulations once again. And you can follow Terry on X and Instagram at TerryCollins_10. And for those of you on Facebook, you could follow the show there as well at The Terry Collins Show. You can follow me on X and Instagram at John Arezzi. And make sure to subscribe now to The Terry Collins Show wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. And on YouTube, we have the channel there, youtube.com/Terry Collins Show. Until next time, this is John Arezzi for Terry Collins. Have a great week, everyone.